In this video, attorney and Monroe County Bar Association President Sandy Fazili will explain what you need to know about car insurance and personal injury, as well as what car insurance companies won't tell you. Stick around until the end and we'll reveal who the worst car insurance company is, in our opinion. But first, hit that subscribe button for more premium content like this. When should you hire a car accident lawyer?
The smartest thing you can do is consult with a lawyer as soon as you are able, after you are discharged from a hospital, if you do require hospitalization, if you do go to the emergency room, most definitely before you speak to any of the insurance companies. All too often we see people are offered a very minor sum just to sign off on a document, not knowing the full extent of their injuries. 6 months later, 9 months later, all of a sudden the injury has gotten to such a point where they're having some kind of surgery. They were given some specialized tests, they were given an MRI, all of a sudden they realize why they're in such pain, and now it's too late.
So even if you think it's like a minor accident, it doesn't probably hurt to call.
I have seen people very seriously injured from what people often call a fender bender or even a side swipe. There have been horrible accidents, tremendous property damage where people have not been hurt, and that's great too. Mm-hmm. But when you have the slightest bit of force can cause a pretty serious injury, especially to your spine, your neck, your back. It does not hurt to make that call and talk to somebody who's got the experience in the area. You're going to follow your medical, roadmap as directed by your doctor or whomever, but you should consult with a lawyer sooner rather than later.
Maybe, Sandy, you could tell the case you just handled where there was a release signed really quickly and there is a small policy and a bigger policy. It's really an illustrative case of what we do every single day, but maybe the story would help you communicate that to the folks.
What happened was about 2 years ago, there was a car accident. The gentleman who was not at fault was offered $750 to sign off. And at the time that he did that, the law requires that you have to be able to prove through your medical records that you've suffered a serious injury. And it's got a very strange definition. But on his face, he didn't have that serious injury right away. After a while, he got a check from the insurance company for $750. He didn't cash it right away, cashed it a couple months later. Luckily, he hadn't signed a release. But they sent him a letter saying, if you cash the check, it's going to be the same as if you signed a release. Well, he cashed the check a couple months after receiving it, and he contacted us probably a couple months ago, not even. And this is after he had undergone some pretty serious back surgery. And I spoke with him, got his whole history, and then at the end he told me, well, I did receive a check for $750. And I asked him about anything he had signed, and he said he didn't remember. So I contacted this insurance company, and they tried to deny him. But after a push, they realized that they probably made a mistake in letting him cash that check without him signing anything. We were able to secure a settlement offer for the full insurance policy limits for the car that struck him and caused the accident. There may be other insurance coverage out there that now that insurance company is looking for, and he himself has some insurance that he can go after. So we may have been able to prevent a real miss on his part by digging in a little bit and advocating for him.
Yeah, that and that additional policy for him is that underinsured policy that everybody in many states has to have. Here in New York, you have to have it.
Actually, here in New York, they're trying to make it so that there's a minimum policy. The minimum required to drive a vehicle in New York State is $25,000. So if you only have $25,000 worth of insurance protecting you, you may not be able to make an underinsured motorist claim depending on different factors. You want to be able to have enough coverage not only to protect yourself if you're involved and you're at fault, but if somebody that only has a little bit of insurance causes a serious injury to you. It's not pushed often by insurance agents. You really have to know what to ask for. And in this instance, it might be the one thing that will serve to not necessarily fully compensate, but compensate the injured party more than he was 2 years ago.
So someone gets into a car accident. The other driver's fault. They have a $25,000 policy, but your injury is worth, let's say, $50,000, and you don't have additional coverage on your insurance. People think when I get into a car accident, like, oh, I'm going to get $1 million because I'm really injured. And that might be true, but that doesn't mean you always get that, right?
In fact, it's very rare because I would say 99.9% of people, they have insurance coverage, but they don't have anything else. They don't have a large sum of money that they've saved that they could be that they could go to help compensate somebody that they seriously injured. I represented a gentleman who was paralyzed as a pedestrian, and he was only able to collect $100,000. The vehicle that struck him only had $25,000. Lucky for him, he was able to make a claim against his own insurance for $75,000. His medical bills were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was able, there was $50,000 worth of coverage on the vehicle that hit him for medical. And after that, he was on his own. So whether it was Medicare or Medicaid, there were significant bills that had to be covered that ultimately he would have been responsible for paying back those insurance companies. We were able to negotiate it so that he wasn't ultimately responsible for those. But for the injury that he sustained, which should have run into the 7 figures, his recovery was kept because there was nowhere else to go after to seek additional compensation.
So how can you protect yourself from a situation like that?
What you should be doing is, the first thing is you should have bodily injury limits on your own vehicle that are at least, I would recommend $100,000, even up to $300,000 of bodily injury limits or liability limits. And you want to make sure that your uninsured and supplemental underinsured motorist coverage limits are equal to your bodily injury limits. That line is very important. The sum UM and the liability or bodily injury, those should always equal.
I have another question, because a lot of people think they have to pay for an injury attorney or personal injury attorney. Is that true?
No, as a matter of fact, most injury attorneys, and if the injury attorney knows their business, then this is how they do it, is the payment for the attorney's fees comes out of the recovery that the attorney gets for their client. They should be paying whatever expenses are related to the case up front. I'm not talking about paying their client's medical bills, but the bills that go along with requesting medical records, whether from the hospital or their physicians or whomever they see, those all come with costs. Those they can charge up to 75 cents a page. So the expenses relating to litigation, for depositions and whatnot, all of those things come out of the attorney's pocket up front. If and when there is a recovery for the injury, the lawyer's fee comes out of that, and then they're reimbursed for their expenses as well.
I was going to we can go back to that, but I was going to segue into this Reddit, because I think that there's some questions along with this Reddit experience that I think a lot of people can relate to. And you could probably clear up for them. Basically, this person says, what are some of the best practices when choosing a personal injury lawyer? Never been in this situation before. Please help. A single mom here. My child and I had a car accident in November of 23. The car was totaled and the other party was at fault. Insurance paid for the initial ER and back and nerve treatments, but ran out pretty quickly. The injuries were persistent, besides the trauma, and unable to find work from home because they were unable to replace the vehicle. The chiropractor and lawyer friend suggested opening a personal injury case. And it looks like the case with the injury insurance company has not yet been closed. So this person wants to know, do I open the personal injury claim with the other party's insurance company before finding a lawyer?
As I said earlier, the first thing you should do once you're able to have a conversation with somebody and before you speak to any insurance company is call an attorney. Just get to know what your rights are. Depending on the state where the accident occurs, in New York State, there's a strange phrase they use. It's called no fault. That doesn't mean that the accident wasn't anybody's fault, obviously. That's a description of where or what insurance company is responsible for paying certain benefits, whether it's medical bills, a percentage of your wages, and it depends on how the accident happened. But generally, the no-fault benefits come from the vehicle that you were in. If you're a pedestrian, they come from the vehicle that struck you, and those are separate from then your personal injury claim. presuming you're talking about a claim for pain and suffering for your injuries, once you speak with the lawyer, they should be able to guide you on the law and what you have to be able to prove.
So the second question is, do I go for the bigger is better firm or the small local firm to represent me?
I think it's not a question of the size. You want to be able to have a relationship and a conversation with your attorney. Finding that lawyer is probably the most important thing. You have to be able to have a conversation with hopefully multiple people to see who knows the area the best, who's going to spend the time explaining it, and trying to guide you on the roadmap so that you're aware of what's coming. They need to be patient with you. I think oftentimes it's better if you are with a smaller firm. You have a more intimate relationship with the attorney and their staff. They are much more easily reachable. Hopefully they have an office where you are, so you can actually visit their office. You should be able to meet with the attorney on a reasonable basis as needed. And oftentimes it's better that you are in that area or in that city where you can see them versus just trying to deal with somebody by the phone or by some remote communication system.
Yeah.
And as the president of the Bar Association, you like lawyers at big firms, you like lawyers at small firms. It's not always about the actual firm. But you said sometimes you might get better service at a smaller firm. But if you can meet with your lawyer and are comfortable with the lawyer, that's what you're looking for to make that decision.
Absolutely. You want to be able to build a relationship with somebody that you can see, shake hands with, at least look at face-to-face in person once or twice to be able to develop that rapport. Small firm, large firm, it doesn't matter on that if you're able to have that relationship that makes you comfortable and you are confident in the advice that you are being given.
So we settle a lot of cases. All cases, believe it or not, are not $1 million. And I can tell you one of the things that I really respect about Sandy and his practice, the lower value case, maybe a case that is in that $60,000 to $75,000 range. Sandy does the work to get the case to $75,000 as opposed to $60,000, where some of the big shops, they get a settlement, there's an offer, they say good enough, and are you willing to do that extra 3-4 months of work to get the client that extra few bucks that is the difference between a really good outcome and just a mediocre outcome?
It's important that the client's interests are best served. We have to make sure that we can justify our recommendations. There are going to be times when we recommend that they keep fighting and they be patient. It's not easy for the clients sometimes to be patient given what they've been through. That's where the relationship comes in, that you're going to get there. They just need to bear with you. Other times, not so much. It's all about that relationship and the patience, but we do what needs to be done as far as advocating for our clients to get them to the finish line.
When purchasing car insurance, what are some things that we should look out for before purchasing?
Presuming that you've got a clean record, no speeding tickets or other, the first $25,000 or $50,000 of coverage somebody might think is expensive. But as you go up to $100,000 or $300,000, the increase in the amount of coverage should be significantly less in cost than the initial $25,000 or $50,000 if your record is clean. So you're going to want to make sure that nobody's trying to pull a fast one on the value or the cost of the premium as you go up. You're going to go up a little bit, but it's not going to be as much as the initial base. The second thing is be very careful. You're not buying apples and it's just a matter of where you're buying them from. The insurance company itself, who you're dealing with, is important, because just because they charge you a lower premium than the other insurance company for the same amount of coverage, you've got to be able to realize why they're charging you less. And the problem is going to come for you, God forbid, when you need to use that insurance for your no-fault coverage. If you're injured in an accident, your car insurance company is paying your medical bills. They get tired of paying your medical bills, and they're going to send you for an exam to a doctor that is probably examining 20 or 30 other people that were injured in car accidents. And they may or may not have been explicitly told to tell the person in their report that you're fine, you don't need treatment anymore. But what happens is, after a couple, 2-3 months of treatment, that's what happens. They schedule you for these exams, and you end up getting cut off from your medical care, and now you have a problem because you can't treat. So that's where these cheaper premium insurance companies are trying to save money, is by preventing you from seeking treatment for your accident-related injuries. You got to be very careful with who you're going with for coverage, because it's not the same. And finally, you don't want to just go to a company because they have the catchy insurance advertising thing, or they've got these celebrities that are doing their commercials. You want to ask around. You're looking for good service. It's not an agent that you're necessarily talking to, but you're digging in a little bit. You're talking to some professionals, whether it's lawyers or maybe some people that you work with who've had to make claims and they've had good service, because you have to be very careful in which company you ultimately pick.
Based on your 28 years as a personal injury lawyer and thousands of interactions with insurance companies, are there any insurance companies you would recommend people never use?
I think you have to be very careful with Geico Insurance Company because they are quick to have somebody examined. And these days cars are being made stronger and safer. The injuries mostly that come out of an accident are what we call soft tissue. Nobody necessarily breaks a bone in an accident. They may, however, have a herniated disc in their neck or their back. They may have a rotator cuff tear in their shoulder. They might have a meniscus or some other injury to their knee, something that does not show a broken bone. And those injuries take time to be diagnosed, because medical doctors will send you for physical therapy. They will send you for some other conservative care before they order that gold standard test of an MRI. And the MRI, 99 times out of 100 will show a herniated disc is impinging on your nerve. It'll show a tear. It'll show that something needs to be taken care of operatively. If that insurance company has sent you for that exam before you've had a chance to have those tests done, you're going to have a problem if later on the test shows something needs to be repaired surgically, because all of a sudden either it's coming out of your own insurance and that becomes an issue for the attorney and the client, or if your Medicare or your Medicaid is being billed, there's a problem because they're going to deny it. They're going to say it's related to an accident. Go to that insurance company, or they're going to want to be paid back by any recovery you might get. So my recommendation for people is seek the treatment that you need immediately. Be aggressive in getting care. I'm not saying that they should be aggressive in going to this specialist or that specialist, but they need to be regular and consistent with their healthcare providers so that they go down that treatment road with some haste, so that they do get examined and they do undergo that test, so that once they have the test, now we know what's wrong with them, and then we can fight with the insurance company and show them that the tests show that there is a problem that needs care, and otherwise the clients are on the outside looking in.